Hey, I'm Chris Connor, the founder of Franchise Marketing Systems, and today we're here with Mr. Ali Nasser, the founder and CEO of the Wingbay Franchise Group. Ali, first of all, thank you for taking a moment to sit down and talk to us a bit and introduce your background and who you are and who Wingbay is. I have had so much fun working with you in the time that we've been together, and you are a truly talented entrepreneur. What you've done with this brand and what you've done with franchising, I think there's a lot that people can learn about from you. So, could you start out with a quick intro? Tell us about you, personal intro, and then we'll get into talking about Wing Babe.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for having me, Chris. It's always a pleasure to, connect with you and it's been fun so far. My name is Ali Nasser. I am the founder and CEO of Wingbay Franchising LLC. Um, Wingbay is a fast casual restaurant, and I've had the experience myself for a little over 6 years now in the restaurant space. Um, when I started, I started in the food truck industry here in Houston, Texas, and um, we started with one food truck, one concept, expanded that to multiple food trucks, multiple new concepts. So we started three concepts in total with, at one point we had a little over 11 food trucks in Houston. Um, and we quickly learned that scaling trucks was difficult, and that's whenever we shifted into the restaurant space and did that for a few years. Grew those all corporate, all owned by me and my corporate entity, and um, we actually got a chance, and we were blessed to be able to get acquired in many of those concepts. And during the acquisition phase, I was we could have just, rode out into the sunset and called it a day. But, with my team, I've been blessed with a lot of very ambitious individuals, on my side. And we decided to, try to jump right back into it. And that's when the whole Wingbay and the franchising idea came about.
That's great. You had opened up multiple company locations that you ran. You had employees, you had staff, you had managers. What about the franchise model made sense to transition over to that channel?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing was during my 5 years or 6 years of operating my concepts, I had a lot of people, trying to learn and kind of have me mentor them in the restaurant space in running their own restaurants. And that was very fulfilling for me, right? And so then I realized, like, okay, now with something new I want to start, how do I get other people involved, right? How do I help other people kind of have that same, or achieve that, quality of life, or that business experience, with me more involved rather than just, giving advice on a call, every now and then, right? So, franchising, just made sense, right? We wanted to grow faster. We wanted to make something bigger than what we, already, did with our previous concepts. And we wanted to, continue to work with other people, other entrepreneurs, business people. And so franchising just made sense for us. And once we realized that, we just, we went full force in it.
That's great. Um, the other thing that you have executed really well on that I think is probably foreign to a lot of business owners is you franchised very soon after launching Wing Bay, the same year, really, the
Yeah.
franchise model. How did you do that, and what was your strategy behind pushing the franchise out so quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've talked to a lot of people, colleagues in the industry that have also started franchising, and they kind of ran their concepts for 3, 4 years and then started franchising. So they had a hard time understanding where I was coming from, starting the franchising right away, right? And again, this goes back to the whole reason we opened Wingbay was for to franchise the concept. So We opened our first location in September. We grand opened in the beginning of October of 2025. 6 or 8 months before that is when we began working on the business, right? So when we opened the first location, we already had, a full staff of corporate, in the back end. It was a little unconventional, but we have our development and training team already, there before we opened our first corporate. We had our marketing department, which is, uh, it's many individuals involved in the marketing. We really focus on that. We had our real estate, plan and whether, it's in-house people or outsourced people, that are already on board and how we're going to expand it as franchising. Our construction team, we do the construction in-house, was already set up all of this before we opened our first corporate store. So the best way to explain it is kind of that foundation for franchise, being a franchise company was set before we even opened our first corporate location. And in a sense, it was like the first corporate was we treated it as a franchise location, right? So we had, franchise business, consultants that are from our like a corporate office visiting that corporate store, right? Treating them as a franchisee, going through the audits, we, prepared. The only reason why we opened the corporate locations was to prepare for franchisees. So when the franchisees come, we know what to do with it. And so that's how we were able to go into franchising so quick. It's because the foundation of Wingbay when we built it was to be a franchise, right? So.
That's great. Yeah, and you have an innate ability to think big and to look at things big and in all of our work together. It's like, man, it is such a great skill to have. And that plays right in with it. Could you speak to the results? I mean, we're probably 6 months in on the franchise launch at this point. Could you talk a little bit about where Wingbay is, for a number of franchisees, and where the company is at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently have 7 locations that are open. Of those 7 locations, only two are corporate stores. So we have five franchise stores. 9 months, 8 or 9 months after we opened the first corporate. And including like in total, we have 25 stores that are either in construction or under the planning and development. And a big chunk of those stores are franchisee stores, right? And we've been really blessed, right, to have people believe in our vision, being such a young company. But also we all hear the horror stories, right, of don't sell too fast, don't expand too fast. And, it's very hard. Sometimes um, you know, growing that fast and being the guy that's in charge of looking at the big picture and all the small things in it and how the dominoes all affect each other, right? Um, sometimes it is overwhelming, but, we've been blessed with a great team here at our corporate office, and honestly, thus far, some really good franchisees that are understanding of it being such a young concept, and giving feedback and being a part of that, growth and development of the brand. So.
It's great. I know it's early on, but based on the experience up to this point, who do you see as being the ideal franchise buyer? What background profile, like what things are we looking for in Wingbay?
Yeah, absolutely. So already we have, you know, a wide range of different people that are our franchisees, right? And some of those people come from corporate background, right? Some of those people come from, a business background, and some of our franchisees actually have restaurant experience, right? And so we approach the franchisees, we know like what we need to teach them, what we need, to be involved with certain franchisees. It's a per case basis thus far. But one thing that is, consistent amongst all the franchisees that we've accepted and that, have been doing a great job with us thus far is uh, they execute, right? And our job, I tell my franchisees, our job is to lay the foundation out, give the guidelines, whether it be in operations, whether it be in marketing or construction, real estate, but you know, the franchisees are the ones who, execute, right? So, um, we want to make sure that we are as hands-on as possible, with the franchisees and guiding them. Because at the end of the day, it is our brand, right? But it's their business, right? The location is their business. It's just our brand. So it's finding that middle ground of, we're here to guide, we're here to, set the systems in place, and it's their job to execute. And so that's the probably the biggest, uh, trait that we look for in the franchisees.
That's great. That's great. Um, you're in a great market segment. I mean, obviously, there's been some huge successes in the wing category, and that's good and bad. I mean, there's definitely a market for it. It continues to show how much of a consumer demand there is, but it's also very competitive. How do you now, and how do we see going forward that we make Wingbay stand out against other brands?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very competitive segment, right? But the way that we look at it here is like, um, we don't want to be the first to do something, right? Usually, if there's a reason why the first person's in, the second, the third, the fourth competitor has joined. It's probably because it is a good business, right? It's a good market, and honestly, that's why we chose the wings, right? We saw some national brands doing really well, international now, right? Just comparing them to other national brands, that aren't even in the wing, segment. They're just in the food service. Wings is leading in many different, categories. So, and we also saw some regional brands, some local, some mom and pop brands that are doing well. And so, the biggest thing now that we've noticed in the past year is that there's a lot of tools that are available to, regional or startup brands like us, um, with AI now that were only available to the bigger guys for so long, right? Um, and that's because of the cost, the time it takes to implement these things, right? And so we have done a really good job of utilizing, these new technologies that are coming out, and getting the analytics, right? Whether it be for marketing and figuring out, okay, how do we engrave Wingbay into our consumers, mind? We have a couple rules here in our marketing department. Obviously, the rule of seven, they got to see it 7 times before they come into our store for the first time. Or, we have a saying here, it's control the stampede, right? With everything going viral, how do we try to push Wingbay to go viral or try to move it this way or that way, right? So, our focus on differentiating Wingbay is more on the back end and getting all that data from for every department, right? Like I said, marketing, real estate, and figuring out, how do these big guys do it, right? And I think in a lot of ways we have figured it out, and it's a lot more accessible for us, as a startup, because of the way technology is moving. So that's pretty much how we've been approaching it.
That's great. Yeah, and it's a great point too. That with AI and tech now, it kind of levels the playing field,
Yeah.
from that standpoint. You're a new dad, and
Yes.
you've got a family, married. How do you balance personal and home and everything that you have going on? What does the time element look like here?
Yeah. You know, First off, hats off to my wife. She's a huge supporter. And she has supported my crazy ideas and my vision from the start. But, a lot of times in the position that I'm in, you don't get to spend as much time as you'd like, right, with the family. But, having them being understanding of that is a big key to having that comfort to be able to put in those 80-hour work weeks, right? And so, um, I mean, it's my responsibility to find that balance. A lot of times, I do, right? And a lot of times it's like, you find yourself apologetic, right? About, not being there, missing certain things. But it's definitely changed my outlook, right? In all sense, in all places of life, and becoming a dad, and especially in business, right? So now we personally, I approach things a little differently, right? But no, it's been a blessing, and if anything, it's pushed us or me to go harder at work and in business, and for my employees. Now I know, um, my employees that have children, I take it more, it's heavy, it weighs heavier on me to make sure that we are successful and they're successful as well. So.
It's great. Um, so from this point forward here into the future, where do you see Wingbay going? I mean, what's the goal and vision?
Yeah, so I mean, our goal is to, nationwide, right? That's the bigger picture, right? But it's also my job to kind of take a step back and break up that goal to make sure that, we're hitting certain milestones. So, for the next, I would say, couple years, our biggest focus or micro focus is to grow in Texas, right? Um, and we have a number of locations we want to get to in Texas. That number falls between 200 or 300 locations. And the reason why we want to stay in Texas for now, a couple things, right? Growing this fast and being this young, you have, like I said, we hear all the horror stories of, operations slipping, right? Or sales not being there because the marketing's not there. And so our plan is to stay in Texas because, the first thing is marketing. We collect marketing brand fund percentages and fees from our franchisees. Now, if I was to collect, that percentage from my franchisees and spread it amongst 3, 4 different states, it doesn't have that big of effect on the markets, right, that we're spending it in, right? Versus in Texas or, like I said, in Houston now, Houston alone, we have 25 locations that are planned and many more that are, under, that we have our eye on. When you have that many locations in one market, we're able to spend a lot more in this specific market, whether it be, influencer, celebrity endorsements in this area or, older guerrilla marketing like billboards or, TV or streaming ads, right? In those markets. So that's the reason why we're sticking to Texas. And Texas is huge. And another part of it is the operations, right? So we understand the risks of growing this fast, right? And we're learning, right, as we go, and our franchisees are a big part of it, right? But we want everything within arm's reach, right, operations wise. So we have a good team and a growing team of franchise business consultants. And a lot of times, with newer franchises or even the big guys, right? It's like one person is handling 20 up to 20 or 30, locations. And we want to make sure that that ratio for us is a lot smaller. I have a cap at 5 locations for now per franchise business consultant. And I want them to touch these stores, right? Twice a week, 3 times a week, every store, and work with the franchisee and developing, making sure that their P&L looks right, making sure their employees are following, brand standards and food safety standards and the customer service and the quality is there. And I feel like if we were to leave Texas at this point, that's one thing that's going to start, slipping through the cracks. And that's what kind of the dominoes start falling and they lead to, lower AUVs outside of our home state, right? Or lower profit margins or unhappy franchisees. So that's why, we're sticking to Texas and we've actually had to turn down a couple, deals that came out of Texas. And we understand that's a blessing to have to be able to say no to someone else's money and investment, right, in our brand. But we're really sticking to it, and we want to make sure that we stay true to the franchisees that invested in Texas so far. So
It's great. And totally agree with the thinking and the plan and how you've executed. Have been so impressed. So impressed.
thank you.
So, Ali, if someone were interested to get more information on Wingbay, what would be the best way for them to connect and learn more?
Yeah, so going on our website, wingbay.com, there's a franchising tab. Um, if you look for it on the website, press that. It'll lead you to a site where, there's a little bit more information about the franchising. Once you put your information in there, our development team will reach out and kind of go through the steps there. You'll, go through a qualification call, discovery call. you know, everything will be, laid out for you. And so it's pretty simple, pretty easy from there.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us, Ali, and really, really, as always, enjoy speaking with you and learning from you.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. And as always, it was fun. So
Thank you.
awesome.